Your mix lacks depth because it lacks headroom. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's No Shoes. We're back with another one, and today we're going to be talking about headroom, specifically in the case of mixing, but we will touch on just a little bit around that topic as well. So, headroom describes the space between the loudest peak of your audio to the actual ceiling of where your audio will clip. Generally, you're going to be clipping around -0 if we're looking at a scale in decibels full scale, dBFS. And when you're mixing, you want about 6 to 3 dB of headroom, which means that you'll be peaking between -6 and -3. Personally, I like to keep my mixes peaking at -6. It gives me the maximum amount of headroom that is recommended by most engineers, including Drew Mazurek. He makes great videos. I'll link him down in the description, and he taught me a lot of this stuff that I am repeating back to you now. But headroom is one of those things where it's not something you can really create. Headroom is the absence of sound in a sense. It is the space, it's the air. It allows your mix to breathe. And there's a lot of different ways to create it. First of all, it's going to start when you're recording, producing, creating, designing the sounds. However the sound is getting into the box for you to make music, that's where it starts. Generally, when you're recording music, you want to peak around -12 dB. That gives you room for your transients, those really high quick peaks, especially on drums and stuff like that. And then as you bring that into the mix, you might increase the loudness of those tracks or increase the level of their signal. And then by the end of the mix, with all of those tracks layered together, you're going to end up with something around -6 to -3 dB, at least if you're following along with that standard and that mode of thinking. And the reason why you want to have more headroom in the recording, then slightly less headroom in the mix, and then finally coming towards the master is because without that headroom, there is no room for the engineer to work, because the master is going to bring your track up to its final loudness in addition to any other small fine tweaks that the mastering engineer makes, in the same way that when you're coming from recording to the mix, the mixing engineer needs room to work, because if all of your sound is clipped, if all of your sound is distorted, it's just hitting the ceiling over and over again, that's no good. You cannot fix sound that is distorted in the way that it is recorded. It is baked in with that distortion if it's clipping, and that will just follow you up the tree from recording to mixing to mastering and any other processes that you're going through in the middle there. So keep that in mind while you're working. Your mix is not supposed to be loud. Loud is an illusion. The human ear loves loud. Loud things sound better to us. They sound more pleasing, but that doesn't mean it's actually better. It just means that your mind and your ears are being tricked, because hearing and psychoacoustics and all of that stuff, it's a really strange thing. Volume doesn't actually exist. Volume happens inside your head and is frequency dependent, and we can get into a bunch of that later if you guys are interested. But regardless, the point being here is leave some headroom, leave some air. And there are ways to create headroom that are more nuanced than just pulling down your faders. So think about like an EQ. Maybe your bass doesn't need all that high end in it, so then you pull out the high end by throwing a low pass filter on your EQ. Now you've created headroom for the higher frequency instruments to come through even more clearly. Same thing for your guitar, your piano, your vocal. Take out that low end. Now you've created some headroom for the bass to come through, because there's not a bunch of low frequency information that's useless coming from the higher end of the spectrum as far as those instruments go. So as you're mixing, as you're working, that's something you always want to keep in mind, is am I leaving space above the audio for more work to be done? And some of you might be tempted to take what's a really hot sound, something with a very high level of signal, and then limit it. But the disadvantage there is you're probably just going to end up compressing and crushing any dynamic range that you have in that sound, and then you're going to end up with something that's very flat across, and although it's not hitting zero, it's still going to essentially be peaking and clipping just at a quieter level. So you'll just have slightly quieter distortion on your track, or more quiet, whatever the grammatically correct way to say that is. But that's kind of the whole crux of this video, is when you're mixing, it's not about being loud, it's not about having a hot signal, and I'm saying this because I did it. I know all of my early mixes were way too hot. And there's different things to consider. You know, if that mix is never going to be mastered, maybe you're doing like a little sound design challenge, or you're doing sound for video, or whatever it is, and maybe you're the end all be all of the mixing and everything that's going to be done with the audio. You can work around that, but at least for standard processes in music, most engineers recommend a peak of -6 to -3 during your mix. They recommend a peak of -12 dB full scale, being the scale that I like to use during recording. And then when you finally get to mastering, there's a whole bunch of things all over the internet talking about what level, using different scales, RMS, LUFS, and a bunch of different stuff. For now, maybe this is ignorant. If anybody's more well educated in the comments and would like to tell me off, that's fine. I would say a master like -1, because what you're trying to do is essentially allow whatever audio system you're piping that audio into to reproduce it as faithfully as possible without distortion. And if you have things too close to the peaks, and then you have a fluctuation in the electricity that's running that circuitry, and it comes in just a little too hot, guess what you have? Distortion. So that's the topic for the day, Headroom. If you guys got any further questions on that, please let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and hit that bell if you want to see more videos like this. I just dropped a new track earlier today called Clip Clop off of Penny God's Video Ambiances. The link tree is in the description. You'll be able to find everything down there, including my Buy Me a Coffee, where you can support these videos, support my art, join our community, and get access to Discord, behind the scenes content, a lot of fun stuff. So without any further ado, much love. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all next time.